imagine you're standing in your kitchen making a piece of toast.
Right. Just a totally normal morning.
Exactly. Just a completely normal morning. But you leave the bread in the toaster just a few seconds too long.
Oh, no.
Yeah. A tiny bit of smoke curls up into the air, and suddenly this piercing alarm starts shrieking right above your head.
The absolute worst sound to wake up to.
It really is. Your smoke detector is going off, acting as if the entire house is engulfed in deadly flames when, all you did was burn your breakfast.
Right. A total overreaction.
Exactly. And that extreme overreaction, that false alarm, is exactly what is happening inside your brain every single time you try to learn a new language or speak to a stranger or really just try anything slightly new.
It's honestly a perfect metaphor because the mechanism, the actual biology of it, is essentially the same. Your brain possesses this ancient, highly sensitive alarm system, and its only job is to keep you alive. Yeah. And today we're going to look really closely at why that alarm system is actively working to stop you from growing. And more importantly, how you can gently teach it to just quiet down.
I love that. And before we get too far into the science of all that, I really want to welcome you, the listener, to a very special kind of deep dive today.
Yes, welcome.
We're exploring the concept of the comfort zone, but we're doing it with a really specific focus. We know many of you listening are learning English or trying to improve your English skills.
Which is amazing, by the way.
It is.
Yeah.
So our conversation today is tailored just for you. We are going to speak a little bit more slowly, speak very clearly, and take our time with complex ideas.
Right, keeping it relaxed.
Exactly. We'll use simple, everyday language to explore some truly fascinating psychology. We won't be stopping to read the dictionary or anything boring like that, but we'll make sure every new idea is crystal clear from the context.
The goal here is just to make this feel like a warm, friendly conversation, where you can absorb new concepts while just naturally picking up the language.
Like chatting with friends.
Exactly. And the concept of the comfort zone is honestly the absolute perfect place to start. Because learning a language, well, it forces you right to the very edge of that zone.
It really does. So let's start by visualizing that zone. I like to picture it as this invisible circle drawn on the floor right around your feet.
Okay, I like that image.
Right. So inside this circle is everything you already know how to do.
Yeah.
The people you know, your native language, your daily routine, everything in there is completely familiar.
And just to pause on that word familiar, that basically means things you already know, right? Things you were totally used to.
Yes, exactly. So in that familiar circle, there are zero surprises, which means you never have to guess what happens next. You are totally safe.
And from a biological standpoint, your brain absolutely loves that. It treats that lack of surprise as physical safety.
Because of that ancient alarm system we talked about.
Exactly. If we look back, thousands of years, early humans lived in a highly unpredictable, very dangerous world.
Right. Saber-toothed tigers and all that.
Yeah. So if you stayed in your familiar cave and you just ate the familiar plants you already recognized, you survived the day. But if you wandered into an unfamiliar forest, well, you might not come back.
So the brain learned to be terrified of the unknown.
Right. It evolved to view the unknown as a literal physical threat to your life.
But wait, modern life is, it's very different from living in a cave. We aren't usually running away from wild animals on our way to work.
Hopefully not.
Right. So why is the brain still treating an unfamiliar situation like, say, me walking up to a cashier and trying to order a coffee in English? Why is it treating that as a life or death scenario?
Well, because the part of your brain responsible for that alarm, it's called the amygdala, it hasn't really updated its software to match modern society.
Oh, well. So it's running on old programming.
Exactly. It can't easily tell the difference between physical danger, like a tiger, and social danger, like looking silly. When you step up to that cashier to speak English, there is a risk of embarrassment. There's a risk of someone looking at you strangely. And your brain registers that social vulnerability, panic sets in, and the alarm bells start ringing. It wants you to retreat to safety.
So we have this overactive smoke detector in our heads, treating a small language mistake like a burning building.
That's exactly it.
Obviously, we can't just live in a constant state of panic, but we also can't just stay inside that invisible circle forever. Because, everything we want to achieve, fluency, a new job, new relationships, all of that is waiting outside the circle.
Right. You have to leave the circle to grow.
So how do we actually bridge that gap? How do we step out without our brain screaming at us?
Well, first, we have to map out the territory outside the circle. Psychologists actually divide our experience into 3 distinct areas or zones.
Okay, 3 zones.
Yeah. So we already discussed the first one, right in the center, the comfort zone, where things are safe but static. No new skills are built there.
Because it's too easy.
Exactly. But directly outside of that is the most important area. We call it the learning zone.
The learning zone. So this isn't like a sudden drop off a cliff into the unknown. It's just the space right next to what we already know.
Precisely. It's gentle. The learning zone offers a state of what we call desirable difficulty.
Desirable difficulty. I like how that sounds.
Yeah. It means it's slightly challenging, but it doesn't completely overload your system. So if you're learning English, the learning zone might mean reading an article where you know 80% of the words.
Okay.
But you have to figure out the remaining 20% just from the context. It requires effort. Your heart might beat a little faster, but you can still function perfectly well.
Right. But there's a third area beyond that, right? Because I know what happens if I try to read like a complex medical textbook in a brand new language.
Right. It doesn't go well.
No, I don't learn anything. My brain just entirely shuts down.
And that is the panic zone. The panic zone is what happens when you push yourself entirely too far too fast.
Okay, so pushing way past the learning zone.
Yes. The challenge becomes so extreme that the situation is just overwhelming.
And real quick, just to highlight that vocabulary word for our listeners, overwhelming basically means it is just way too much to handle.
Right? So exactly. Too much information, too much fear all at once. And when you hit that panic zone, your cognitive functions, like your ability to think clearly and process memories, they actually begin to shut down.
Wow. Which means pushing yourself into a total panic is actually counterproductive.
Highly counterproductive.
Meaning it has the exact opposite result of what you want. You think you're being brave by jumping into the deep end, but you actually stop learning entirely.
Right.
And you probably scare yourself so badly that you run right back to the center of your comfort zone.
That is the big danger. The mission is never, ever to force yourself into the panic zone. The real strategy for lasting growth is to step gently into the learning zone and just figure out how to tolerate being there.
Tolerate the discomfort. But, even stepping into that gentle learning zone is something people actively resist. I see it all the time.
Oh, constant.
People will stay in jobs they complain about every single day.
Sure.
Or, for language learners, they'll study grammar rules in their bedroom for years, but never speak a single sentence out loud to a human being.
Yes, the eternal student trap.
Right. So if the learning zone is literally the only place we can grow, why are we fighting so hard to avoid it?
The barrier is almost always fear. And it takes a few specific forms. We have the fear of judgment, where we worry intensely about what other people think of our mistakes.
That's a huge one.
Yeah. We have the fear of failure. But the absolute deepest one is simply the fear of the unknown outcome. Human psychology actually features a very strange quirk.
Oh, what kind of quirk?
We strongly prefer a certain negative over an uncertain positive.
It's a certain negative. Okay, so you mean we would rather choose an unhappy situation that we already understand rather than risk a new situation that might be great just because it's unpredictable?
Yes, exactly. Think about that person staying in the bad job you mentioned. They know their boss is difficult. They know the work is boring. That is a negative, but it is a known negative. They know exactly how to survive it. If they look for a new career, it might be incredibly rewarding and uncertain positive, but they have to risk the unknown to get there.
So they just stay put.
Exactly. We frequently confuse feeling comfortable with feeling happy, and they are not the same thing.
Wow. Comfort does not equal happiness. I am going to challenge this idea a little bit, though.
Please do.
Because it seems entirely rational to want to avoid making mistakes or looking foolish, especially when learning a language. When you use the wrong word and accidentally say something silly, it feels terrible.
It really does.
So is it really a strange quirk to want to avoid feeling stupid?
Well, it is completely rational to protect yourself, yes. But the problem is how we define the mistake itself.
How so?
Inside the comfort zone, a mistake feels like a character flaw. It feels like a permanent failure. But once you shift your mindset to the learning zone, a mistake is literally just data.
Just data.
Yeah. It is neutral information telling you which direction to adjust. Your brain actually needs those mistakes to build new neural pathways. But, you make a very fair point.
Right, because logic doesn't always fix fear.
Exactly. Just telling someone, hey, don't be afraid of looking silly, that doesn't magically cure their fear.
No, it definitely doesn't. Knowing the science doesn't automatically turn off that smoke detector in our heads. So let's walk through a highly practical scenario.
Okay, let's do it.
Suppose I am absolutely terrified to speak English to native speakers. My invisible circle is very tight. How do I gently move into that learning zone without accidentally triggering the panic zone?
The mechanism here is gradual exposure. You break the scary task down into micro steps, tiny little actions. So you do not start by walking up to a group of native speakers at a loud party.
That would definitely be the panic zone.
Exactly. Instead, you start alone in your room.
Right. So maybe step one is just listening to a deep dive like this one, sitting comfortably on your couch. The risk is zero. No one can judge you.
Perfect first step.
Then maybe step two is pausing the audio and repeating a sentence out loud to an empty room. Still very safe, but slightly more active.
And you just sit with that until it feels completely normal. Then you increase the challenge just a tiny fraction. Maybe you take out your phone and record a voice memo of yourself speaking English and you play it back.
Ooh, that one is tough.
Yeah.
Nobody likes hearing their own recorded voice.
It's true. But it's still private.
Right. Then, maybe the next week, you send that short voice memo to just one trusted friend who is also learning.
Yes.
Then a month later, you join a small online text chat. And finally, after all those tiny safe steps, you go out and order that coffee from the cashier.
Exactly. And by breaking it down this way, you are actively dismantling something psychologists call anticipatory anxiety.
Anticipatory anxiety. So just to clarify for our learners, anticipatory means looking forward or expecting something to happen.
Right.
So this is the dread you feel when you're anticipating the event, looking forward at what is coming, and basically imagining the absolute worst.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Our brains are prediction machines. When you look at a future event, your imagination writes a whole movie about how terrible it will be.
Oh, totally. A horror movie.
Right. You imagine the cashier laughing at you, the line of people behind you getting so angry, you completely forgetting every English word you ever learned.
It feels so real in the moment.
But here's the secret. The anxiety you feel before the event is almost always infinitely worse than the event itself. When you actually get to the cashier, you might stumble over one word, they hand you the coffee, and life just goes on.
The movie in our head is a tragedy, but reality is usually just a mild documentary.
That's a great way to put it.
But, even knowing that it is just anticipatory anxiety, taking that very first step, like just hitting the record button on that voice memo, it still feels like trying to push a giant heavy rock up a hill. The friction is just so high.
It is. The friction at the very beginning is always the highest. And that is why introducing a mental constraint can be so incredibly helpful.
A mental constraint.
Yeah. One of the most effective tools for this is the 10-minute rule.
Oh, I use this all the time. The 10-minute rule is a fantastic way to negotiate with your own brain.
It really is.
Because if you tell yourself, I have to sit down and study English for 2 straight hours, the brain rebels. It's too big. It's too much effort.
The smoke detector goes off.
Exactly.
Yep.
But if you say, I am only going to open the book and read for 10 minutes, and if I am absolutely miserable after 10 minutes, I have full permission to close the book and go back to watching television.
And biologically, what happens during those first 10 minutes is fascinating.
What happens?
The initial friction you feel is really just the brain resisting a change in context. It takes energy to shift your focus. But once you are past that 10-minute mark, the new context is established.
So the brain settles down.
Yes. The smoke detector realizes there is no fire. The anxiety drops, momentum takes over, and usually you just keep going past the 10 minutes.
You've essentially tricked yourself into starting,
Right.
and then the momentum does the rest of the work. But what about the physical feeling of panic? Sometimes, no matter what mental tricks I use, my physical body still reacts. If I have to speak in a meeting, my heart is racing, my palms are sweating, my breathing gets really shallow.
This brings us to a really remarkable physiological truth.
Okay.
If we attach medical sensors to your body and measure your heart rate, your breathing, and your stress hormones when you're deeply nervous, the graph looks a very specific way.
Right. Lots of spikes, I'd imagine.
Yes. But if we then measure your body when you're wildly excited, say you're waiting in line for a thrilling roller coaster, the graph looks almost exactly the same.
Wait, really? The physical state of being terrified and the physical state of being excited are identical.
Yes. The biological arousal is the exact same. Your body is just flooding with adrenaline, preparing you for action. The only difference between nervousness and excitement is the cognitive label your brain attaches to that physical feeling.
So the context dictates the emotion. That implies we can actually hack the system using our language. Instead of sitting in the meeting room thinking, I am so nervous to speak, you actively change the script. You tell yourself, I am so excited to share this idea.
Yes.
You aren't trying to calm your heart rate down, which is almost impossible anyway. You are just giving that fast heart rate a positive job to do.
That is a process called anxiety reappraisal. Trying to force yourself to be calm rarely works because the gap between high energy panic and low energy calm is just too wide.
That makes total sense.
But shifting from high energy panic to high energy excitement, that is a much shorter bridge. You reframe the physical sensation from a warning signal into a readiness signal.
That is incredibly powerful. But, doing all this mental gymnastics, negotiating with your brain, taking micro steps, reframing your adrenaline, it honestly sounds exhausting to do in isolation.
Which is exactly why you shouldn't do it in isolation. The comfort zone is deeply tied to our sense of social safety. If you are trying to step into the learning zone all by yourself, the feeling of vulnerability is very, very high.
Because it's just you out there on a limb.
Right. But when you create a support system, when you join a conversational group, or find a mentor, or simply partner up with another English learner, you dilute the fear.
Because if everyone in the room is making mistakes together, the mistake no longer threatens your social standing.
Exactly.
Shared discomfort somehow becomes comedy instead of tragedy. You can actually laugh at yourselves.
That's the beauty of it. A supportive community acts as an external safety net, which allows you to stay in the learning zone much longer without sliding into the panic zone.
Let's project this forward a bit. If someone listening right now starts using the 10-minute rule and they reframe their anxiety as excitement and they take tiny steps into the learning zone every single day, what actually happens to their brain over time? Does the invisible circle just keep moving?
It doesn't just move, it stretches. This is where we see the magic of neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change.
Exactly. When you repeatedly expose your brain to something unfamiliar and you survive it without disaster, the brain physically rewires itself. It updates its internal map.
So the territory that used to be outside the circle gets swallowed up by the circle.
Precisely. Think about the first time you ever drove a car.
Oh, terrifying.
Right. You were probably gripping the steering wheel, staring intensely at every single mirror, hyper aware of everything. It was exhausting. You were right on the edge of the panic zone.
I was definitely sweating.
But a year later, you can drive down the highway while listening to the radio and planning your grocery list. Driving didn't magically get easier. Your brain physically adapted until driving became a familiar automatic process. It moved permanently into your comfort zone.
So the discomfort is always temporary. What is terrifying today becomes your baseline normal tomorrow.
Exactly.
That is highly motivating. But I think there's an even stronger motivation hiding behind all of this. And it has to do with how we view our lives in the long term.
You were talking about the psychology of regret.
Yes, I am. When researchers study people at the end of their lives and ask them what they regret most, the answers are strikingly consistent.
It's never what people expect.
No. People rarely regret the things they tried and failed at. They might feel a brief moment of embarrassment when they stumble in a new language or mess up a job interview, but that feeling fades really quickly.
Right.
What haunts people for decades are the things they did not try, the chances they didn't take simply because they wanted to stay comfortable.
The pain of a bruised ego is temporary, but the pain of a missed opportunity is permanent. When you avoid the learning zone, you are trading long-term fulfillment for just a few minutes of short-term relief.
That really brings everything we've discussed today into sharp focus. So rather than reciting a rigid list of rules, let's just weave these core truths together for anyone listening who wants to make a change today. I'll start. Tip 1, choose small challenges.
Tip 2, expect discomfort. It's a sign it means you are growing, not failing.
Right. Tip 3, celebrate those small, brave actions. Any tiny step is a win.
Tip 4, remember, your imagination makes fear much bigger than reality. The anticipatory anxiety is lying to you.
Definitely. Tip 5, repeat your actions to stretch your zone. Like driving that car, repetition makes it normal.
Tip 6, don't compare your comfort zone to anyone else's. Your invisible circle is uniquely yours.
And finally, tip 7, remember that not trying hurts way more in the end than failing.
That is a wonderful summary. The overarching theme here is gentleness combined with persistence.
Gentleness and persistence.
Yes, you don't need to leap blindly into terrifying situations to grow. In fact, doing so will likely just trigger your ancient alarm system and send you running backward. True growth is about finding that sweet spot, the learning zone, where you are stretched just enough to pay attention, but not enough to freeze.
And when you do feel that resistance, you can recognize it for what it truly is. It's not a sign that you were doing something wrong. It is just a biological false alarm, just a smoke detector reacting to a piece of toast. You can negotiate with it using the 10-minute rule to get past the initial friction, and you can reframe that racing heartbeat as the physical sensation of your comfort zone actually expanding.
And you just have to remember that your imagination is an unreliable narrator. The anticipatory anxiety will always paint a darker picture than reality. The only way to prove your imagination wrong is through small, repeated actions in the real world, ideally alongside other people who are on the exact same journey.
We have covered incredible ground today. We moved from ancient survival instincts to the mechanics of the learning zone, and finally, to the long-term reality of regret.
It's a profound shift in perspective. But before we finish, I want to offer a slightly different way to look at the ultimate goal of all this work.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, we often talk about expanding the comfort zone as if the goal is to make it so massive that absolutely everything in the world eventually feels easy and familiar.
Right, like we eventually conquer everything.
But the world is infinitely complex. You will always encounter new, unfamiliar things. So what if the real goal isn't just to make the circle bigger? What if the ultimate achievement is actually falling in love with the sensation of being outside the circle?
Wow. Becoming entirely comfortable with the feeling of discomfort itself.
Exactly. When you learn to view that racing heart and that feeling of uncertainty not as a threat, but as the absolute guarantee that you are growing, the world opens up completely.
It's beautiful.
You stop waiting to feel confident before you try something, and you realize that the confidence only comes after you do the uncomfortable thing.
That is a phenomenal paradigm shift to leave with our listeners. The goal is not just a bigger circle. The goal is an entirely different relationship with the unknown.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much to everyone listening for spending your time with us on this deep dive. We hope this relaxed pace and clear focus helped you not only practice your English, but also gave you some very real tools to conquer the friction in your own life.
It's been a pleasure.
You do not need to overhaul your entire existence today. Just find one tiny way to step into your learning zone.
Until next time, embrace the awkwardness and keep growing.